Alright, in this video we're going to get a look at the internet and TCP/IP, and from a perspective of running some commands to see what things look like. Okay, so we're first going to clear this stuff out. And I want to go here, Linux command line tools. There's a lot of good information in here. This would be a good review for anyone that uses Linux, but we're going to look at the network commands. Okay, so we'll look at each, let's look at these in a certain order. Okay, I'm logged into the CS server here on my computer, and I'm first going to look at just ping. So what ping does is it tries to send a little bit of information to whatever you type in, and if you type a name, then the operating system will do the lookup, the ping command will do the lookup of the name, convert it to an IP address. So that is one way to get an IP address of some name. Another way to get an IP address of a name is with the whois command, which we'll see in a second. The display here, it says that it received and the total amount of time. Okay, so the whois command, there's no match. So this looks for a DNS entry for cs.indstate.edu. That doesn't show up. Let's look up kennyjeff.com. And if we go back up, this is information that shows up for kennyjeff.com. That so if we just look at the top here, there's the domain. It's registered by this company, so this is ultimately the company that was used to register that domain name. And the server that is keeping this information is this server. The name servers are here, so anyone that wants to go to kennyjeff.com, these are the DNS servers that will be used to figure out what's the actual IP address for someone that wants to go to that website. And there's a bunch of other information here as well, but that's the main stuff. There was actually no IP address in there. Okay, so if we do ping, this says that this computer, this URL here, is going to this IP address, so this machine here. Alright, so that's ping and whois. Let's look at some of these other commands. So if we run the netstat command, this prints out all the active internet connections that are running on the computer right now. There's a bunch of NSF connections between the CS server and different computers. And then there's SSH connections. Those would be for people that are logged in from home. This is my desk computer, so I have a connection there that's still open. And so we see that these are okay. So that's the netstat command. The only other, so the other information, so we can see the local address and the foreign address, the way TCP works. Transmission control protocol, transport control protocol. the transmission control protocol. The way that works is you always have, there's two sides. So with my desk computer there, this is one machine that's sitting on my desk, and this is the CS server. They're connected. And then besides that, there's in addition a port. And the part here is called the port, and it's really a number. So my machine, it's using port, whatever is doing this communication here is using port 59,451. And then the port on CS is whatever port is used for Nmap. It's putting the text there, that's some particular number, which you could look up. Okay, so there we can see open connections and what ports. So if I wanted to say what is happening on port 15,001, there I can see it right there. All right, Netstat. TCP dump. Let's see. Okay, so regular users do not have permission to run TCP dump just with default parameters, so we'll leave that alone. That's one that will print out the raw TCP data that's going back and forth. Okay, hostname says which computer I'm currently logged into, if you don't remember. Whether you're logged into X1 or CS, you can use the hostname command. Traceroute. So Traceroute will print off some information about the route from the computer well logged into some remote device. I'm going to run it on my local computer here. So if I tell it to go to google.com, it prints some information about how it looks like it gets to google.com. The first connection here is the router in my house. So that's the first connection from my laptop. And then the last connection here should be close to Google. And this isn't exactly printing the path, but it's some approximation of what the path looks like. So you can see here it goes through multiple different computers at Frontier. And then these ones down here should belong to Google. And if you use the whois on that IP address at the end, then it does show up as a Google IP address. And we could do that on each one in the middle here and see at some point in time where it goes from Frontier to Google. Okay. So we could see there's just a transition directly from Frontier there to Google here. Doesn't tell us where it physically is, but this is an approximation of the path. If we look and do this on CS server, Traceroute, the path will look different because the CS is connected through ISU, which ultimately goes through a consortium called iLight, which I believe is the Indiana public institutions. Okay, so then we go directly from iLight in Indiana to this may be Google here. And no, that's part of the Indiana network. Okay, so it goes somewhere else. All right, Traceroute. Sometimes you'll see a sequence of stars show up here down at the bottom. So it'll go like this for a while, and then you'll see some stars, and it'll stop showing IP addresses, and you'll just see rows that have stars. And that means that you're probably getting blocked by a firewall at some point that doesn't want this traceroute information to come through. Okay. Trace path. Okay, very similar to Traceroute. We'll just leave that alone. We'll leave this one alone as well. I don't think this one will work. Let's see. Okay, Nmap for network map is for getting information about your local network. So if you run a bunch of machines, first we'll just run it on one computer. So this is scanning this particular computer to see which ports are open. It's going to try common ports. So these are the typical ports that would be open on a server. I don't know what this one is here. Unknown. Alright, and then if you can also give it a range, you'll look at the man page. There's options about how it does the scanning of the network, but then there's some examples about specifying ranges. So here's an example. Let's see, CS. So IP address is in the same range as CS, but with the last, this is the last 16 bits here to specify this number. Sorry, 8 bits. Let's see, we'll just type this. It's doing the scan right now. So it's potentially scanning 255 different IP addresses there. The first one that comes up here, Judy, is one of the servers that we keep. Laurel is another one. There's the CS server. And then X1, X2, X3, and so on are some of the lab computers. Y1 is another one of our labs where it's on the first 16 bits of the IP address are the same, and then it's on a different, this 8 bits here is different. So we could scan that network to see the machines in that lab, which are generally all on the same part here. Okay, so that's Nmap. Ifconfig. Okay, so this is showing, what is the IF for? Internet something? But this is showing network cards. So Ethernet 0 here is the main, that's the main network card that's coming out of CS for just regular network stuff, internet stuff. So this is this IP address, which should be what we saw before. The net mask has some meaning that we'll talk about in another video. The This is the version 4 internet IP address, and this is the version 6 IP address. We'll talk about those in another video as well. Right now we're just looking at what information we can get from commands. MTU is 1500, that has some meaning as well. All this information has some meaning, and there's actually multiple cards in here, Ethernet cards. Right, okay, so that's Ifconfig. If you're running a Linux or Unix machine and you have root or administrator access, then IF up and down can be used to turn on and off Ethernet devices as you do configuration in Ifconfig as well. But you don't have root or administrator access to the CS machine, I hope. So none of these last 4 commands will be available to you. Alright, so that was a quick tour of a few commands that we can use. So just to recap the commands and tools, the commands are whois, ping, traceroute, ifconfig, nmap. Those are all commands that we tried out here. And host name and Netstat. Okay, they're all giving different types of information. Okay, and let's say that's it for this video.